Hi, this is Digital Femme and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to share a story on how I trained a dragon. Don't believe me? Then just keep on watching. Hi, I'm glad you stayed. So before I talk about how I trained my dragon, I just want to tell you that this video is the 19th video of the 1-1-66-day challenge. And what that is me doing one thing for 1 hour a day for 66 days straight. So I chose to do one video for 66 days to jumpstart this old YouTube channel of mine. Now let's talk about that dragon. Before I really get into how I trained a dragon, I need to give you a backstory. So I live in a mixed-use building, and what that means is there are 66 residential units, there are offices with a co-working space, and there's also a retail area in the lower mezzanine. One of the stores that occupies this space is called Atlantis 2000, and you got it, it's a crystal metaphysical store. So I've been living in this building for 6 years, and the couple that owns this store have become really good friends of mine. One day I entered their store and I was browsing through their collection of books, and a number of their books had talked about dragons. Not only did they have books on dragons, they also had tarot cards on dragons, oracle cards on dragons, and little figurines and sculptures on dragons. And I went up to the lady who owned the store and I asked, "What's the deal about the dragons?" And she just looked at me and she said, "What do you mean?" And I go, "Do people really buy these dragon things, and why would they?" And then she said, "Oh yeah, people buy dragons." And then I said, "Why? What would they do with them other than just putting them up for decoration?" And then she says, "Oh, don't you know? Dragons are real." And I'm like, "What?" And then I said, "You're kidding me, right?" And then she says, "Oh no, have you ever heard of the veil?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, you tell me." And then she said, long time ago, dragons existed and they were around just the same time as humans and all these other mythical creatures. And then I said, "See, and that's the thing, mythical creatures, they are myths." And then she said something to me that kind of made me think. She said to me, "How do you think these mythical creatures got into the stories of cultures and have been around for thousands of years?" Well, that was a good question, but I don't know, great imagination. So I didn't think much of it. If you must know, I am a stickler for stories. People can tell me a story, whether they believe it or not, it's up to me. I just like hearing them. It doesn't mean that I believe them, that's up to me. A year later, I was invited to this couple's place to pick up a potted plant. The first time I visited their place, I really admired their living room, the interiors, and especially the balcony that surrounded their space. And then I said, "Wow, you've got this balcony. That's so amazing." And then the husband looked at his wife and said, "Oh, you should tell her the story about the dragon who came in one night." And I was like, "What?" So here's the story. One night, the couple was sitting on the couch watching one of their favorite shows, and the sliding doors to the patio was open because it was a really cool night. And so they began to tell me the story that as the night progressed, they could tell that it was about to rain and thunderstorm. You know what that's like. When the wind starts to gush, starts to get colder, and you can hear the sound of rain off in the distance. The couple told me that as they were sitting down, all of a sudden, there was a big gush of wind that came through the porch, and the sheer curtains that were beside the sliding doors just like blew in. And then the lady told me that as she was sitting on her couch, she felt that great energy that threw her back, and then she felt this great weight that just sat on her lap. By this time, I was sitting down in one of the single chairs in their living room, just like at the edge of my seat and listening to her story. And then I said, "What was that?" And then she said, "Oh, it was a baby dragon." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" And then she said, "It was a baby dragon." And I go, "Well, did you see the baby dragon?" I don't know. At this point, I just went on with it. And then she said, "No." Then I said, "Then how did you know it was a baby dragon?" And then her husband said that oftentimes when there is a thunderstorm, and then usually when lightning accompanies a thunderstorm, and there are dragons flying around, dragons like to take rest and shelter so as not to get struck by lightning. Well, that made total sense. And at this point, I was just playing along, and I had to ask, then how did the baby dragon know to come in through your balcony into your living room? And then they said it probably was looking for a place to land, and then it realized that the sliding doors were open, so it just like flew through. Okay, so another year passed, and I had been going down to the crystal store every once in a while. And on one particular day, I thought of asking them, hey, whatever happened to that baby dragon that flew into your living room at the start of a stormy night? And then they said, oh, it's still around. And I'm like, what? And then they said, yeah. And sometimes we let the sliding door open so it can go out and fly. Okay. Now, you need to know that these dragon stories were told over a period of 2 years. Whether I believed it or not, whatever. I kind of remained neutral, but that didn't stop me from searching on YouTube and looking up everything there was to know about mythical dragons. And I could tell you what I found out, but this would be a much longer video. And you know what? You can do that research yourself. So now it's time for me to finally share my story of how I trained a dragon. So a few months had passed by after I had visited the couple downstairs in the crystal store. And at this time I was still living in the building, but I had moved to a new and larger unit that had gotten converted into a loft space. So if you don't know already, I've been working remotely as a digital strategy consultant for the past 6-7 years. And one night I had been sitting in my living room with my laptop working on a project. So while I was working, daytime had transitioned into the night. And as the evening progressed, I could hear the wind outside start to pick up. And there was gushes of wind that started to come through the open window into the living room. To be honest, those cool gushes of wind were really welcoming during that summer night. As I kept on working, the wind kept picking up, and far off in the distance, I could hear the rain coming. After a while, the wind speeds really picked up, and the rain just started pouring. And that was when, as I was working on my laptop, I felt this, I don't even know what it is. If you can imagine being in a bathtub and having something come in with you into the bathtub to displace the water, that feeling of the water being displaced and moving, that's how it felt in the living room when I was sitting on my laptop and I felt this. It wasn't even a wind. It was like a huge mass came into the living room through the window that wasn't even open. It was like a small screen window, but it wasn't wind. I literally felt an energy, a mass that I couldn't see, a huge presence that was like, that came to my side, and it kind of made me, well, it didn't make me move, but I felt this pressure. It wasn't wind. And this mass, this pressure that came in through the side of me, I felt it move along the back of the couch and come around. And a few feet away from me on this large L-shaped couch, it had settled. At this point, I didn't know what to think. All I thought was, WTF. Now you need to know, I was feeling a bit anxious. But it was almost like if you're scared of a dog, don't let the dog know that you're scared of it, or else it could smell the fear and it would come and bite you. Well, that's what I was told when I was young anyway. It didn't matter. I did get bitten by a dog, no matter how hard I tried to pretend I wasn't afraid. But that's another video. So here I am, dealing with this anxiety, pretending not to be afraid, working on my laptop, and just After a while, I had gotten immersed in the project that I was working on, and I had forgotten about whatever that energy was that entered the space and gave me such great anxiety. So there's one important missing piece that I forgot to tell you that I should have told you earlier. And that is, earlier in the day, I had crossed the street over to the Subway sandwich store to get a dozen cookies for $5. Usually when I work online, I always have snacks at my side. And on this day, I was craving for cookies. I usually order the normal amount of cookies. I get 2 of everything. And that 2 of everything includes 2 Smartie cookies. During the afternoon, I consumed 1 Smartie cookie. And that meant there was 1 other Smartie cookie that was left over. So fast forward, me working late at night, forgetting about what had happened earlier with this energy mass coming into the living room, going behind me and sitting 2 feet away from the couch. I didn't see it. I forgot about it. But at this time, I was wanting a cookie. So I reached over where I had placed the batch of cookies to feel for the Smartie cookie. And when I say feel for the Smartie cookie, I know what I was doing because I made sure that the Smartie cookie was at the very top because I knew that was the next cookie I would start to eat. So I was feeling the bumps for the Smarties, and I couldn't feel it. So I turned around and I grabbed the little black plastic container that the dozen cookies came in, and I pulled it towards me, lifted it up to actually pick out the Smartie cookie, but there was no Smartie cookie. And I was like, what? Now at this point, I had thought of something that I didn't really want to allow myself to go there. And I'll tell you what I had thought. Because it was a thunderstorm, and because whatever that massive energy I had felt that kind of like pushed on me, and I felt go around me, and I literally heard the crinkle of the fake leather couch go, like whatever that feeling is when poof, something goes down on the couch. I had this teeny weeny inkling that the dragon ate my cookie. So the next day, I was going down the elevator to leave the building to meet a client at a cafe. And then I met the gentleman that owned the crystal store. And then I said, "Hi, John. Guess what? Something happened to me last night, and I got to tell you." And then he said, "Oh, have I got a story to tell you?" And then I said, "What?" And then he says, "Oh, you'll never believe it. Come down to the store and I'll tell you." And I said, "Okay." So we both went down to the crystal store, and then he told me. Then he said, "See all these bookshelves?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Last night they were all knocked down." And I was like, "What happened?" And he says, "A dragon came into the store and just knocked everything down." And I was like, "A dragon? What?" And then he said, "Oh yeah, I'm so glad there was only 2 people in the store, and those 2 people in the store were old-time customers that know about these things. So I'm so glad that nobody else was in there, or else it would have freaked them out." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And then he says, "Well, Perlin and I were standing there by the cash register entertaining the couple, and all of a sudden the dragon came and knocked down all the books off these bookshelves." And I was like, "What? What did the couple say?" And then he said, "They didn't say anything. We just all looked at each other and we went, okay." And then I was like, "Really?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, they knew what it was." And I was like, "They knew it was a dragon?" And then he said, "Oh yeah." And then I go, "Well, what dragon?" And then he said, "The baby dragon." And then I said, "The baby dragon?" And he says, "Oh yeah, and it grew." And I'm like, "So you mean the baby dragon follows you around?" And then he says, "Well, why not? It knows where we live, so of course it's going to know where we work." And I'm like, okay. And then that's when I told him my experience about the night before. And then I said, "John, do you think that that dragon that came to the store yesterday was the same dragon that came into my living room last night?" And then he says, "I don't know." Really? Well, thank God a few minutes later his wife came in. And then when she saw me, she said, "Oh, you should have seen what happened yesterday. Did John tell you? A dragon came in." And then I said, yeah, he told me. And guess what? And then I started to tell her the story, what happened the night before. And then I said, "Do you think it's the same dragon?" And of course, you know what she said? She said, "Of course it is." And I was like, "Really? Well, how did the dragon know to come to me?" And then she says, "Well, you're our friend. You hang around with us. Of course the dragon knows you." Really? So that's my story of how I tamed a dragon with a Smartie cookie. My Smartie cookie. Whether or not you believe this story, that's up to you. All I know is I can only share what I personally experienced, and I am not embellishing or kidding. If you like this story, then why not like and subscribe to my channel? And guess what? Tomorrow I'm going to talk about fairies. Bye.